Altogether, it took 92 minutes, just over an hour and a half. And you know what I'm talking about. So tomorrow, we will commemorate the 24th anniversary of 9/11. And I don't know where you were, but I was across the street at Southwestern Seminary. I was a suite mate with Al Faisal and Stephen Stuckey. And I had an early class that day. I had a 7 o'clock class. And I was in the faculty lounge because some of the early faculty members had arrived and there was a commotion. Of course, you know my involvement in that. I have a memory book of the loss here in the Pentagon, if you want to look at it afterward. It's got pictures and a biography of each of the persons that was murdered, not just killed, but was murdered at 9/11. It took 92 minutes. The American flight number 77 hit the face of the Pentagon that had just been renovated, fortunately, and helped it withstand even further damage at 9:37 Eastern Daylight Time on the 11th of September. But I said it took 92 minutes. 51 minutes before that at 8:46, and all of these are Eastern Daylight Time figures. American flight number 11 hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Some of you weren't awake at that time. Some of you actually saw then the next plane hit because the news had broken by then. 34 minutes before the Pentagon was hit at 9:03 a.m., United Flight 175 hit the South Tower. And then at 9:37, American Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. 12 minutes afterward at 9:59 a.m., the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed. 16 minutes later at 10:03, United Flight number 93 then crashed in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And 40 minutes later, that is 92 minutes after the first impact of flight number 11, the North Tower collapsed to the World Trade Center. The casualties were just shy of 3,000, 2,996. When I say casualties, I'm talking about killed. Actually, casualties were higher than that. Casualties were almost 9,000 because 6,000 others were injured. On the planes, the 4 planes, 265 died. In the New York World Trade Center, 2,606 died. 340 firefighters gave their lives. 72 law enforcement officers died. 52 military, and we don't even like to mention them, but 19 terrorists also lost their lives. Citizens from 90 countries lost their lives that day. This was a world event, even though it was targeted against the United States. The Pentagon account was 757 flight of American Airlines number 77 was traveling at 360 miles per hour over the Navy Annex, and it almost clipped the telephone lines that were just to the west of it as it approached the western face of the Pentagon between corridors 3 and 4. As I said, the Pentagon had just been renovated. I had just come off of duty. I had just retired, and I had been the previous assistant chief of chaplains, as you know. And they had moved us out of that slice of the Pentagon, 1/5 of it, with a view toward moving us back in after it was renovated. And then they were going to move the next slice out for 5 years. And then it was going to take 25 years to renovate the Pentagon. But somebody had this brilliant idea: why move a group out and back in? Why not just move them out and rotate the others? So they had not moved the chaplains back to their original position. If they had, we would have been at the 0 point of impact on the ground floor. But the chaplains were officed in Crystal City at that time. It created a pancaked area of 75 to 100 feet wide. It destabilized another 50 feet on either side, and a fireball went down through, you know, there are 5 rings, A, B, C, D, and E. A fireball went down E ring and down D ring. There were 124 that were killed almost instantly in the Pentagon. 1 was injured severely, taken to the hospital, and died later. 53 passengers aboard the American Flight 77 were killed, of course, 6 crew members and 5 terrorists. There were three stages that occurred after that. There was the rescue stage and recovery conducted by the Arlington County, Virginia Emergency Services. And then when it became obvious that there were no survivors, they went into the recovery of bodies and the investigatory stage. And then finally, cleanup and demolition was done by what we used to call the Department of Defense, which of course you know now is the Department of War. They did the identification and disposition of remains at Dover Air Force Base, a large hangar turned into a morgue. All passengers were identified. All but 6 Pentagon persons were identified, and every casket came out. And when we gave the briefing at the Pentagon Family Assistance Center with John Van Alstyne, Lieutenant General, United States Army, doing the briefings, the word of warning was that the funerals would have to be conducted with closed casket. The remains were not viewable. 184 families were affected. 177 came to the center where I was the deputy director, and we helped families then deal with all of the post-trauma issues that they had to deal with. So what about the people? Marion and Bruce Serva had a plan for what they'd do if terrorists ever did attack the Pentagon, which I find pretty incredible. I didn't know that people ever thought that the Pentagon was assailable. He would stay at his post office job in Northern Virginia, and she would let him know that everything was fine, she was okay. On the 11th of September, Bruce waited for his wife of 26 years to call, but he didn't get an answer. So he tried to dial through to her cell phone, and he tried several times. She was a congressional liaison for the U.S. Army. He waited and waited and waited when he got home and she didn't arrive. When he finally had gotten home, he saw that the driveway was eerily blank. And after an unnerving work day, when his eyes locked on the driveway, he knew that she was not there. Peggy Hurt had just received a promotion as an Army accountant and had been on the job at the Pentagon for 2 weeks. Amelia Fields turned 46 on that day, on the 11th of September. This was her second day working at the Pentagon as a civilian secretary for the Army. Her husband and high school sweetheart, William, slipped out of their home. It was her birthday during breakfast, and he put a surprise birthday card in her car. While she drove to work, William, a retired Marine Corps master sergeant, baked her a chocolate cake. And he put it right there in front of the door so it would be the first thing that she saw when she returned home. Amelia never saw her cake. Lieutenant General Timothy Maud was a Deputy Chief of Staff of Personnel. With 3 stars, Lieutenant General, he was the highest-ranking military official killed in a combative engagement, which this was since the Civil War. Ironically, at the moment of the attack, he was being briefed by Ernest Wiltshire. He was being briefed about an improved plan for, of all things, survivor benefits for military employees. His sergeant major, Larry Strickland, was just 1 month away from retirement and was on what we euphemistically call terminal leave. But he then came in that day, even though he was on leave, to help with this briefing. And he was so dedicated to his mission that it cost him his life, because Wiltshire and Strickland both perished. James Lynch was known throughout the building for his kindness and his cheer. He was a Navy civilian who was a video technician, and he walked the halls of the Pentagon, and during lunchtime he carried a bucket of Werther's candy with him, and he'd hand them out to people, and he'd smile and greet them in a very kind way. And he was known as the Candy Man. Colonel Dave Scales had fiery red hair and a positive, can-do, very positive attitude that really made a difference in people's lives. He was an evangelical Christian. He was a music composition major in college, but he wasn't in the music corps of the Army. He was a colonel serving on staff there at the Pentagon. He was a Renaissance man with a beaming personality and a strong Christian witness. He wrote beautiful hymns, and some of those were played at his memorial service in Washington. Retired Army Sergeant, Master Sergeant Max Bielke had been the last U.S. combatant soldier to leave Vietnam. Now, those of you old enough to remember the airlift coming out of Vietnam and the people clamoring for the helicopters, remember that? He was the last person on the last helicopter out of Saigon on the 29th of March, 1973. Cong Nguyen was less fortunate than Bill Key. He didn't get out of Vietnam so quickly. His dad and 2 siblings had escaped when the communists took over, but Cong and the rest of his family had to wait another 6 years before his dad then could send for them and they could be reunited in America. And Cong Nguyen was proud of his adopted country and considered it an honor to work as a Navy contractor in the Pentagon. The Pontel family paid a dear price to defend our nation. Before being killed in the Pentagon, Lieutenant J.G. Darren Pontel, a Navy intelligence officer and graduate of the Naval Academy for 3 years beforehand, he was killed. But 12 years earlier, his older brother, Stephen, was also killed while trying to land his aircraft upon the USS Lexington. Lisa Young was 37. She loved working at the Pentagon as an Army assistant personnel agent. She liked the precision, the sense of purpose, the excitement of being right at the hub of the Department of Defense. But her first love was her 17-year-old daughter, Chiquita. Mother and daughter spent endless hours at the mall there in Crystal City. They spoke by phone several times a day. They loved being just silly together, mother and daughter, and just having a good time. Her daughter was her life, and Chiquita and her mom did everything together. It was just the 2 of them, and now it's just Chiquita. The most poignantly affected by all of these were the children, especially the yet unborn. Naval Commander Patrick Dunn and his wife Stephanie were expecting their first child, and as he left that day, that morning, on the 11th of September, Patrick for the first time not only kissed his wife, but he kissed his wife's stomach. Army Major Ronald Milam's first priority was his family. He and his wife Jacqueline were expecting their second child, and that child was born the following January. Navy Reserve Lieutenant Commander Ronald Volk was employed at Johns Hopkins University. He worked in the Applied Physics Laboratory. And he was on his second day of annual training. Now, what that means is he was a reservist, and he was there for a 2-week period. He was on the second day when the plane hit and he was killed. He left behind a 3-year-old son with his wife and an expectant second child on the way. Army Major Kip Taylor also loved children. While visiting Honduras on a mission trip, he was so moved by the stark conditions of the children in the orphanage there that he arranged for churches to make donations to be sent to the children and help the orphanage. Kip's wife, Nancy, afterward delivered their second child. Many mothers were casualties. Also among them were Army Staff Sergeant Maudlin White. She left behind a 5-year-old daughter. Navy Petty Officer Marcia Ratchford left behind an 11-year-old son, an 8-year-old daughter, and an 18-month-old daughter. Donna Bowen, 5 school-aged children. Deborah Ramsar, a 7-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. Rosemary Chapa was just months away from retiring from the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA. Now, instead, she had just missed, after this, her daughter Elsa's wedding in December. When Laurie Lachek told her children that their dad, David, had been killed, Zachary and Jennifer, you might imagine, sobbed and screamed. Then they asked questions that were both childlike and chillingly mature. What will we do for the family picture this year at Christmas? Mom, does that mean that you're going to have to go back to work? From the mouths of babes. So who were they? 55 soldiers and sailors, 70 civilians who served faithfully as those in uniform, mixed races and countries of people who loved this country, 30% African American. Latinos included Jose Calderon and Daniel Caballero, Diana Pedro and Rosemary Chapa. Asians like Krish Bishundat, and I mentioned Kong Nguyen a minute ago, Ching Sun Pak and Ham Moy. A wide range of denominations, mostly Christian, 40 Catholics, 40 other Protestants beside Baptists. There were 30 Baptists, 4 Jews, 1 Buddhist, and 1 who, on the card that they filled out for their identity, claimed to be an atheist. But the common thread for all of them were that they were great Americans. They were at their post, defending the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And they kept to their appointed places of duty. They prepared to sacrifice themselves for their country. One of them had gotten a call from one of his relatives that had told him about the attack on the first tower in New York. And they were concerned about the Pentagon, although nobody really in their right mind should be concerned about the Pentagon. I mean, how safe could it be, you know? But he called his relative there in the Pentagon and he said, no, my place of duty, he was a Navy employee, a Navy civilian. He said, my place of duty is here. And it's my time. I'm ready to go. You see, this reflects common core values of the Navy: courage, commitment, and honor. It reflects, and I'm not going to talk about the Air Force because there weren't any Air Force personnel killed, but it reflects Army values: loyalty, duty, respect for others, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. You see, the Pentagon, some insights that I want to close with. And you know, my closing insights are always as long as the introduction. Okay, so number one, the Pentagon, America's symbol of power, is not an ivory, we know now, it's not an ivory tower, and it's not an ivory fortress from which we send people to fight. It also became a battlefield that day. It's not impregnable. It's not unassailable. It is not like David thought Jerusalem was. Major Dwayne Evans had been through the rigors of airborne and ranger training. He'd served in dangerous assignments in Egypt, and this was long before the Afghan War and the Iraq War. He served in the Gulf War. His brother Roy said this of his brother, Dwayne: the Pentagon was the safest place in the world to work. That's what we all thought. It was the ultimate career assignment and the one place where the family wouldn't have to worry about his safety. A second observation is America is also not impregnable, and we know that. But it is resilient. America is not unassailable, but it is bending. America is subject and prone to attack, but it will not be broken. A third observation is we should not put our trust in earthly power. The psalmist in Psalm 20 verse 7, some boast in chariots, you know how it goes. Some boast in horses, but we trust in what? The name of the Lord our God. The psalmist in 33, and I think that's David, the king is not saved by a mighty army, a warrior is not delivered by great strength. A horse is a false hope for victory, and a horse in modern terms is a tank, cavalry, whatever. A horse is a false hope for victory, nor does it deliver anyone by its strength. Our soul waits on the Lord. He is our help and our shield. Fourth observation, life is short. Life is unpredictable. With your loved ones, never say tomorrow or someday. Never pass by the opportunity when you leave the house to tell your loved one that you love him or her and your children. We may not have tomorrow, and the time to get ready to do so may not come. We always talk about ministry tomorrow. When God puts you in a place to do ministry, it's then. We may have time to prepare, we may not even have time to prepare to die. Dave Scales was reading his email, and then he wasn't. Marjorie Salomon was talking with her daughter Amanda in New York, and then the phone went silent. A fifth observation, through all of this, and the problem of evil and suffering, God is constant. God is faithful. The same God who loves us gave his only begotten Son. The same God who shows mercy and compassion on us has feelings of compassion when we grieve and we sorrow. He suffers and sorrows with us. And the same one who strengthens and soothes us, we must remember there is indeed, if you want to use an old hymn, a balm where? In Gilead. Number 6, there seemed to be a hope for new unity and healing in America. I walked the streets of Crystal City and then Washington. There was a great sense of civility and caring, even within the Beltway. People came first, not policy. And boy, is that a change. Priority was on family. There was less bigotry, apparently, less racial animosity, ethnic division, gender problems. We were simply in that day for a few weeks Americans. I don't know if you remember it, but there seemed to be a great sense, not just pride, but valuing being comrades alongside each other, regardless of race, gender, national ethnicity, background, simply Americans. And there was a great thirst for spiritual things. The negative side of it is it obviously did not last. Our nation has been balkanized even more since then than ever. A seventh observation. There's a need even today for a new resolve in America. There are reminders that, there comes a time when we must be willing to pay the price. And that is not just hiring people to carry a gun. It's not just recruiting people to go into, like Joshua is in the Army, or the Navy, or the Air Force, the Coast Guard, the Space Force. Would I miss the Marines? It's not just tasking them to do it. There needs to be a resolve in the American spirit in our spine. Our soldiers, and this is kind of an aside, our soldiers and our airmen and our Navy personnel did not lose the war in Vietnam. If you want to say that war was lost, it was lost because of the resolve of the American politicians and the American people. No, what we need to realize is it takes self-sacrifice and not self-indulgence to be a strong nation. We need to have resolve and patience and determination and self-discipline, and we need to be focused on what the real enemies and who the real enemies are. And folks, the real enemies today in America, some of them are in this country, but many of them are beyond this country. We need to be united as Americans. We need to support our leadership, whether it is a Barack Obama, a Joe Biden, or whether it is a Reagan or a Trump. We need to be supportive of our leaders as they lead us into the future against those kinds of terrors. We have short memories. Do we only remember these things? This is September the 10th, but I'm doing it tonight because tomorrow's Thursday and we don't have Thursday prayer meeting, okay? Do we only remember these things on anniversary dates? Do we remember those who are actually out there on the front line right now, around the globe? Who would have thought that after this we would be fighting almost 20 years in 2 wars? And it's not over yet. We must not lose our resolve, and we must not lose our national will. Now, I know this is prayer meeting, so I know a lot of what I've talked about tonight is patriotism and nationhood and all. But there are some spiritual principles, and I addressed a couple of them, and I want to close with these. We need to be resolved, and remember this, because we're American, that doesn't mean that God is on our side. You remember what happened when Joshua stood outside Jericho? He asked the representative, the warrior leader for the Lord, whether it was an angel or a theophany. He said, "Whose side are you on?" And what did the angel answer? The warrior of the Lord. He didn't say this, but what he implied was this. The question isn't, whose side am I on? He said, take off your shoes. You're what? You're on holy ground. The question is, whose side are you on? So that's a question we need to ask today. Whose side are we on as Americans? Do we live in a country where we proclaim the gospel and we encourage people to be Christ followers, Lord followers, and that be our unity and not just being Americans with a passport? For the Lord God helps me, therefore I am not disgraced, Isaiah says in Isaiah 50. Therefore I have set my face like flint, and I know that I will not be ashamed. Who set his face like flint? Jesus Christ. And he went to the cross and he suffered and died for us so that we might give the gift of eternal salvation to others and not make them Americans, but bring them into the kingdom. Only those who hope in the Lord will not be disappointed, and that's what Isaiah says in Isaiah 49. Those who wait and hope for me will not be put to shame. So I hope tomorrow on 9/11 that we reflect on, the price that was paid by 3,000 people, yes, that we remember those that stand in the gap today, but we also remember our responsibility to go forward with resolve and commitment to kingdom and the kingdom of God and bringing people in it.